Before we begin, this is not about ruining your Halloween. It isn't about mocking your traditions or shaming the way you celebrate. It's about looking at the roots under the pumpkins, at the bones stitched into the costumes, at the fire that burned long before plastic cobwebs were sold in shops. I speak of Samhain with respect. Respect for the ancestors who left food at the door. Respect for the women branded witches. Respect for the dead whose names were turned into saints, not their own. What follows is not doctrine. It is reflection. It is story. It is me laying threads on the table, asking you to look at the seams with me. If that feels heavy, close the door now. If you're still here, sit close to the fire. And remember, we do this with respect for the living and the dead. Every hearth went dark. The village gathered in shadow, breath held. Then, on the hill, a spark was struck, a neat fire, clean and new. From that blaze, torches were carried house to house, relighting the hearths one by one. The year was dead. Winter had begun. And the veil, they said, was thin. The dead walked. The hidden folk stirred under the hills, and to survive it, you made a bargain. Bread left on the table, milk at the door, a chair set for the absent, a candle lit in the window to guide them home. And if you feared the dead would not spare you, you hid your face, wore a mask blackened with ash, so the wandering souls would pass you by. This wasn't play. This wasn't sugar. This was contract. Fire for darkness. Food for safety. Mask for survival. What we call Halloween began as this. The treaty at the threshold. Today we dress it in polyester. Plastic witches with neon green faces. Superheroes at the door. Buckets shaped like pumpkins, shouting trick or treat. Supermarkets drown in sugar. Ghost costumes made in factories 10,000 miles away. A whole industry built on plastic cobwebs, pumpkin spice, and novelty fangs. Harmless, we say. A party for children. A night of jump scares on Netflix. Of school discos with glow sticks. Of adults pouring wine while the kids eat their weight in Haribo. Cute, cozy, harmless. But that's the trick, isn't it? To laugh it off as innocent, when really you're wearing the skin of something older. Because these costumes weren't invented to look cute in photos. They were worn to survive the night. Not polyester masks, but faces blackened with ash. Not for candy, but so the wandering dead wouldn't recognize you. What we call trick or treat was once a pact with the hungry dead. Feed them and they'll spare you. Refuse and they'll take what they're owed. They gave it many names. In Ireland and Scotland, it was Samhain, summer's end, the hinge where the light dies and the dark begins. In Wales, they called it Calan Gaeaf, the first day of winter, and the night before, Nos Calan Gaeaf, a night when no one lingered outside, for the spirits chased the last stragglers home. They said a black sow ran with them, the Huk Thi Guta, I'm sorry. I tried to learn this word in Welsh and I can't do it justice, so I apologize as you say it. They said a black sow ran with them, tailless, snatching the careless. On the Isle of Man it was Hoptuna. Children carried lanterns carved from turnips, sang songs at the doorways, and welcomed the year's turning with rhyme and light. Different names, different tongues, but the rhythm was the same. The harvest was in, the cattle brought home, the year was dead, winter had begun. And then Rome arrived, not with bonfires, not with masks, but with a calendar. In May, the church once feasted its saints, but by the 8th century, Pope Gregory III moved the feast to November the 1st. The reason? Just to override, to drown Samhain under holy names. November 1st became All Saints' Day, the 2nd, All Souls' Day, and the night before? Yes, you know it, we all do. All Hallows' Eve. The same date, the same season, but the meaning was rewritten. You no longer left food for your ancestors. You prayed for their souls through the church. You no longer set a place at your table. You paid in prayers and masses, and Rome decided who was released and who still suffered in purgatory. That's the fracture. Samhain said, "The dead are yours. They come home tonight. Feed them, guide them, sit with them by the fire." The church said, "The dead are ours. They sit in our vaults. We will tell you which are saints, which are damned, which are waiting, and you will pay to free them." Kinship became contract. Ancestors became currency. The Feast of Fire became a feast of saints. The names survive: Samhain, Calan Gaeaf, Hoptuna. But the power? The power was buried under Rome's stone. But stone can only cover so much. Calendars don't stop the seasons. You can change the name, but you can't stop the dark from falling. Underneath the saints, the old fire still burned, and every year, when the light failed, the people struck the spark again. First, you put the fire out. Every hearth, every flame, every candle. The whole village sinking into darkness together, a silence heavy enough to make the skin prickle. And then, on the hill, the priests or druids struck the need fire. No old flame allowed. These had to be new, born of friction, wood against wood until it spat a spark. The first light of the new year. From that blaze, torches were lit and carried down the slopes, each home rekindled from the same source. A village woven together by one flame. The year reset. Between those twin bonfires, they drove the cattle. Not just a symbol, a purification rite. The smoke warded off sickness, parasites, the eyes of spirits that stalked the winter nights. And they threw bones into the fire, the remains of the year's slaughter. Not bonfires as we think now, but bone fires. The crackle of marrow in the flames. The dead fed on smoke as the living warmed their hands. Fire as covenant, fire as shield, fire as the very breath that kept the world turning. And why the fire? Because the veil was thin, the boundary between worlds worn like an old cloak. Tonight the dead could see you. The other folk, the Aus Sea, the mound dwellers, could walk your roads. You didn't light flames to be festive. You lit them to remind the sun to come back. You lit them because winter was long and you might not survive it. This was the contract. Death walks. You keep the fire. The fire blazed on the hill, but even fire has shadows, and in those shadows the dead walked. Ancestors, kin, children buried too young, women who died in childbirth, warriors cut down in raids. And with them came the Aus Sea, the people of the mounds who lived in the hollow hills, in the barrows that still rise from the fields if you know where to look. Not fairy wings and sparkle, but older, stranger, hungrier. So the people made a treaty. They left food and drink at the threshold, bowls of milk, plates of bread, ale poured onto the ground, a libation for the unseen. A chair was set by the fire for the grandmother who had gone into the earth. Her presence still felt, her place still honored. For one night the dead could eat, and if they were remembered, they would bless you. Forget them, and they would remind you. A curse, a sickness, a year of famine. The other world never leaves empty-handed. And to walk safely among them, you wore a mask. Not polyester, not cartoon witches with green skin. Ash, smeared across your face, animal skins pulled tight, the hollow skull of a beast strapped like a crown. You hid your face so the dead would not know you, so the spirits passing by would tilt their heads uncertain. Is this one of us? Or is this one of them? For one night the living dressed as the dead, a disguise not for fun, but for survival. So when you open the door on Halloween now, and see children painted and masked, remember what they're really echoing. They are playing at the oldest technology we ever had. The mask as camouflage, the mask as treaty, the mask as shield against the hungry dead. They called it guising. You dressed yourself in skins, in rags, in the grotesque grin of a turnip lantern. You went house to house with your face hidden, not asking, but demanding. A gift, a coin, a bite of bread. Sometimes you sang, sometimes you joked, sometimes you acted out a little play. That's mumming, masks and mischief as theatre. You became a character from the other world for one night, a living spirit on the doorstep. And people gave, not because it was cute, but because it was dangerous not to. A treat for the geyser, or a trick from the dead behind the mask. A pact, not a game. By the Middle Ages, the church had already renamed the season. Samhain was now All Hallows' Eve, and the geysers, the wanderers at the door, were folded into a new practice, souling. The poor, the children, the desperate, they knocked on doors, begging for little round cakes, soul cakes, stamped with a cross. For every cake eaten, one soul would be freed from purgatory. The ancestors who once came home to eat with you, now they were locked away in a church vault, and only a priest's blessing could buy them out. The offerings remained, but the address had changed, no longer to the dead themselves, but rerouted through Rome. And those masks, the ash smears, the animal hides, the skull faces, once they were your shield against the spirits, but to the church they were something else. Witchcraft, devilry, pagan filth. The same women who tended the fires, who knew when to set the chair for the grandmother's ghost, who carved the turnip faces and led the mummers in song, suddenly they were accused of flying with demons, of suckling the devil, of feasting with him on this very night. The church didn't just steal the fire, it turned the keepers of the fire into monsters. Are we surprised? I'm not. It's just same old, I suppose. The mask was no longer protection, it was evidence. So the feast of survival, the laughter of mummers, the quiet prayers of children with soul cakes, all folded into a new story. Saints on the calendar, witches on the pyre, children dressed in masks they no longer understand. Trick or treat, they shout. But listen carefully. It isn't a game. It's the echo of a bargain with the dead. When the fire was lit again, when the cattle had walked through the smoke, the people turned to another hunger. Not just survival of the body, but survival of the heart. Because Samhain was the turning of the year, and what better night to ask the dark what comes next? So they played games, but don't hear game as amusement. These were rituals of knowing. Drop 2 hazelnuts into the fire, name them after lovers. If they burned together, so would you. If they popped apart, so would you. The nut was the soul, and you were watching your own fate crack open in the flames. Or peel an apple in one long curling strip, toss it over your shoulder, and look back. The skin would fall into the shape of a letter, the first initial of the one destined for you. Or stand in a dark room, candle in hand, facing a mirror. They said you'd see the face of your future love, or a skull if you would die before the year was out. And the young went into the fields to pull up kale stalks by moonlight. The length and shape told the kind of spouse you'd marry. Dirt clinging to the roots foretold wealth. A crooked stalk meant hardship. These were not parlor tricks. These were questions asked at the thin place. Will I love? Will I wed? Will I live? What waits for me in the dark? And today, we call them party games. Apple bobbing at school fairs. Fortune-telling reduced to teen magazines and Halloween tat. The bite of prophecy dulled into a laugh. But underneath, you can still feel the weight. The way an apple's skin falls is still a spell. The way a fire cracks a nut is still an omen. We just laugh louder to pretend we don't hear it. Before the pumpkins, there were turnips. Knobbed, twisted, hard as bone, carved with knives into snarling faces, eyes gouged out, mouths hacked into grimacing holes. They weren't decorations, they were guardians. You carved a demon's face, you hollowed its skull, and you placed a coal inside. A burning ember from the sacred fire, The dead would see the light and think, "This house already belongs to the spirits," and move on. There's an Irish tale, the story of Stingy Jack. Jack tricks the devil, traps him up a tree, makes him swear never to take his soul. But when Jack dies, heaven won't have him, and hell can't touch him. So he's cursed to wander the earth forever, with nothing but a single coal to light his way. He hollows out a turnip, drops it inside, and becomes, ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you, Jack of the Lantern. That's the face glowing at the window. Not a friendly smile, but the warning of a damned soul drifting in the dark. And when the Irish carried their stories across the Atlantic, they found pumpkins. Softer, bigger, easier to carve, and brighter. A lantern you could see from the road. The turnip skull was traded for a pumpkin grin. The ember became a candle. The spirit's face became decoration. And now we line them up outside our homes like mascots. We Instagram them, hashtag them. We forget they were once shields. Forget they were once bargains with the dead. The burning face has become the smiling pumpkin. The warning has become an advert. The women held the fire. They carved the lanterns, laid the food at the threshold, told the stories by the hearth. They were the memory keepers. They were the ones who remembered. And then the church looked at them and called them witches. The accusations first took shape in sermons. Disguises of suit and skin became evidence of night flying. Masks to confuse the dead became proof of a Sabbath with demons. In 1487, two Dominican inquisitors published the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, a manual of death. It declared women weaker in faith, prone to lust, easily deceived by Satan, of course, because as women are just these weaklings and, I don't know, depraved people. It claimed witches flew at night, feasted with the devil, shape-shifted into animals. All echoes of Samhain, masks of beasts, night processions, offerings to spirits. This book became the manual of witch hunters across Europe. And the bonfires once fed with animal bones, they began to burn women. In 1590, King James V of Scotland sailed home from Denmark with his bride. A storm rose and battered the fleet. The king survived, but fear clung to him like salt. Whispers came from Denmark. Witches had raised the tempest, and James believed them. And so the North Berwick witch trials began. Dozens accused. Among them Agnes Sampson, known in her parish as the wise wife of Keith, a midwife, a healer, the kind of woman who once would have tended the Samhain fire, guided births, blessed cattle, left milk for the dead. They dragged her to Edinburgh, shaved her head bare, strapped her in the pillywinks, a thumbscrew that crushed bone and nail until fingers split like twigs, twisted ropes round her skull until her eyes near burst. Under torture, she confessed to what they wanted, that she had sailed in a sieve across the sea, conjured storms with demons, and met the devil himself at North Berwick Kirk. King James questioned her personally. She whispered back to him the secrets of his wedding night, details she could only have learned through gossip, but he took them as proof of her diabolical power. In January 1591, Agnes Sampson was strangled and burned on Castle Hill, her ashes scattered where once the bonfires of Samhain had smoked. From that night forward, James was obsessed. He wrote Demonology in 1597, fanning the hunts into an inferno. In 1612, the Moors of Lancashire gave us another fire. 12 accused. The most famous, Old Demdike, Elizabeth Southerns, an 80-year-old blind woman, a cunning woman, known for charms and blessings. She confessed freely to being a witch, not because she trafficked with Satan, but because she believed her gift came from the old ways. Alongside her were her daughter, Elizabeth the Vice, and granddaughter, Alison. 3 generations accused together. The family was poor, and their neighbors had long resented them. When a peddler fell sick after an argument with Alison, the old grudges cracked wide open. At Lancaster Assizes, 10 were hanged. Old Demdike died in her cell. Her daughter Elizabeth and granddaughter Alison swung on the rope. Pendle Hill entered legend as a place of witches' sabbats. But the truth is simpler and sharper. It was the destruction of a family of women who carried the last flicker of Samhain's craft. Between 1626 and 1631, the hunt tore through southern Germany. In the bishoprics of Würzburg and Bamberg, lands where bishops ruled like princes, holding cross and crown in the same hand, the witch fires became epidemic. Hundreds executed, some say nearly 1,000. Whole towns emptied. Records survive. Children as young as 9, accused of flying on pitchforks. One boy broke under torture and said he had ridden through the night. That was enough to light the pyre. In Würzburg they killed Dorothea Flock, a young mother. Her husband begged the emperor for mercy. The reply arrived, but too late. She had already burned. These bishoprics became furnaces of death. The bonfires of Samhain once fed the gods with marrow. Now they fed on human bone. And then it crossed the sea. 1692. Salem, Massachusetts. 2 girls convulsed, claimed unseen hands pinched them. Ministers cried witchcraft. The names came quickly. Tituba, an enslaved woman of indigenous and African heritage, accused first. Under beating, she confessed to what they demanded: night flights, animal shapes, a black man with a book. Then came Sarah Good, a beggar, Sarah Osborne, who had defied the Puritan order by remarrying. In the months that followed, over 200 accused, 19 hanged. One man, Giles Corey, pressed to death with stones for refusing to confess. His last words? More. Wait. Salem became legend, but it was the same story rehearsed again. Samhain's night of spirits turned into Satan's carnival. The women who remembered remained as the devil's consorts. 1590, 1612, 1631, 1692. Agnes Sampson, Old Demdike, Dorothea Flock, Tituba, Sarah Good, Giles Corey. 4 fires across a century. Different lands, same script. The fire that once renewed the village became the fire that consumed its keepers. The ash that once masked your face to survive the dead became proof you had danced with devils. And the witch on your Halloween shelf, cackling from plastic broom, is their shadow, the smoke of memory sold back to you for pennies. Fire was once the covenant. You put it out together, then lit the need fire on the hill. The whole village carried its torches home, one flame to bind them. The cattle driven through smoke, the bones crackling in the pyre. Fire as shield, fire as promise, fire as survival. And then England rewrote the fire. In 1605, a Catholic plot was uncovered. Men hiding kegs of gunpowder under Parliament, hoping to blow up King James I and his government. The name burned into memory. Guy Fawkes. The plot failed. The king lived. And the very next year, Parliament ordered an annual commemoration. Bonfires lit across the country. Prayers for the king's deliverance. An act of Parliament binding it into law. 5th November, forever. Remember, remember, bonfire night. Do you hear the inversion? The bonfire of Samhain, once a covenant with ancestors, became the bonfire of obedience. Once you burned bones to feed the spirits. Now you burned an effigy of Guy Fawkes to feed the state. The fire was no longer yours. It belonged to the crown. And then the effigies changed. Not just Guy Fawkes, but the Pope himself. In the 1600s and 1700s, Bonfire Night became Pope's Day. Children dragged grotesque paper popes through the streets, begging a penny for the guy, before the figures were thrown onto the flames. It wasn't just theatre, it was a license for hate. In London, Bristol, Norwich, the bonfires spilled into riots. Catholic homes attacked, chapels defiled, priests beaten. Samuel Pepys wrote of the chaos. Drunken mobs, effigies paraded, violence sanctioned for one night a year. Even across the Atlantic, the ritual traveled. In Boston, boys hauled popes through the streets until 1775, when George Washington himself banned it, calling it divisive and dangerous. Do you see the arc? The fire that once bound a village became the fire that divided nations. The flame that once called the sun back became the flame of sectarian hate. And even that meaning has burned away. Today the bonfire is fenced off, ticketed, commodified. In one village near where I lived, it cost nearly 40 pounds, for a family of 4 just to stand in the cold and watch. Church grounds hired out, booze tents raised, the sacred fire reduced to a spectacle, another cash cow dressed in sparks. From covenant to crown to carnival, the fire always draws us, but what it means has been sold, year after year, until nothing remains but receipts. And yet, isn't it strange? Even now, the fire still draws us. Crowds hurtle round the flames in November. The sparks leap. The faces glow. We no longer know why, but the old contract is still in the smoke. Light a fire and the dead will come. Burn a body or a straw man, and something will always answer. When the Irish carried their stories across the Atlantic in the 19th century, they carried Samhain in their bones. They carried the turnip lantern, but the New World gave them pumpkins, softer to carve, brighter to burn. The skull face of Europe became the jack-o'-lantern grin of America. They carried the guising, children masked going door to door. But in the New World, the disguises became costumes, and the offerings became candy. They carried the bonfires, but in America, fire became parade floats, civic festivals, harvest fairs. The rituals scattered, then reassembled into something new. By the early 20th century, Halloween in America was already a carnival. Parades, pageants, community nights. By the 1920s, shopkeepers were selling costumes. By the 1950s, candy companies had seized the door-to-door ritual. Trick or treat! Once an exchange of blessing for offering, became the sugar economy's dream. The old threat, give us food or face mischief, was packaged as innocent fun, and corporations made billions, and keep making it. Halloween became a holiday not of ancestors, not of fire, but of profit. Think of it. A feast once meant to honor the dead, now measured in how many fun-sized Snickers you can collect. A ritual once meant to guide souls, now a night for brand mascots and plastic masks from the supermarket. Even the lanterns, once carved to keep the spirits away, now sold in foam, LED, safe for children's rooms. The skull turned into merchandise, the omen into decor. And yet, when the masks are on, when the lanterns glow, when the streets are filled with shadows and sweets, something older still walks. Every child knocking a door is a memory of geysers asking for offerings. Every jack-o'-lantern is the echo of a skull burning in the night. We laugh, we play, we buy. But Samhain is still there, grinning through the plastic, waiting in the shadows. Halloween is not only the night when the dead come home. In Mexico they call it Día de Muertos, the Day of the Dead. And though it is not Halloween, it is kin. The tradition is older than the church. Long before the conquistadors arrived, the Aztecs, the Maya, the Nahua held feasts of the dead. They believed life and death were a cycle, the living and the departed woven together. The Aztecs gave the dead offerings of food, flowers, obsidian knives. They honored the Lady of the Dead, who guarded the bones in the underworld and opened the gates for souls to visit. When Spain conquered in the 1500s, they brought with them All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. The missionaries moved the indigenous feasts of the dead to early November, grafting Catholic prayers onto native roots. But the old rites did not die. They merged. They adapted. They survived. The marigolds, the candles, the food laid on altars, these were not European inventions. They were memory carried forward, half in shadow, half in light. A treaty between colonizer and native, where the bones of the old gods still whispered under the saints. Today, families build ofrendas in their homes, altars with photographs, plates of tamales, cups of atole, loaves of pan de muerto baked in sugar and bone shapes. Marigolds blaze in orange, their petals scattered to guide the souls. Children decorate sugar skulls, not to frighten, but to laugh with death as a friend. In the cemeteries, families hold vigil. They clean the graves, light candles, eat and drink among the stones until morning. For 2 nights the dead walk, and for 2 nights they are fed. Europe had All Souls. The Isles had Samhain. Mexico has Día de Muertos. Different rivers, same sea. Feed the ancestors, guide the souls, keep the bond. One culture lights a bonfire, another strings marigolds, another sets bread at the table, all saying the same thing: the dead are still ours. And isn't that what was stolen? The right to remember in our own way, to see death not as terror, but as kin knocking at the door. Halloween may have been gutted, but across the border the contract still glows, painted in orange and gold. You can still do it right, you know. Put bread on the table, leave a chair empty, light a candle in the window, say their names, eat in silence for a minute, step outside and let the dark look at you without flinching. Costume if you like, but remember what the mask was for. Give at the door, but know what you're paying into. And when the kids shout trick or treat, hear the older contract underneath. Feed the wandering, and may the wandering spare you. So, I really hope you enjoyed this Halloween special. I've bent myself over backwards to record it. I'm sure you can tell by now that is not my usual setting, so I had to improvise, as I can't find just a nice piece of nature just yet to keep me going. Although the ones you'll listen next, they were still recorded in nature. But this one, it was calling me. I really wanted to do a Halloween special. I hope you guys enjoy it and have a fabulous Halloween, whatever it is that you decide to do. With all respect, this episode, it is done with all respect from my heart to Samhain and ancestors and the old ways. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys for keep listening to me. If you are still, if you're not, you know, peace and love in your heart. I am grateful no matter what. And if you've got any threads, family rites, old songs, the way your gran did it, bring them. Tell me, ask me, argue with me. Not in a bad way, by the way. Just, you know, let's engage. Let's talk. Why not? Come and find me on Instagram and TikTok. Whatever side you prefer at this point, like, it's fine. I have both. I don't know how I'm doing it, but I am. I have a bit of both. TikTok is not like fully Bloodline, but there are some videos and some threads over there that I sometimes just feel like I have to let it out somehow. So on TikTok, you'll find me at wildlywoven279. And on Instagram, you will find me on Bloodline Myths. Come and lay your bones on the table, because this night doesn't belong to the church. It doesn't belong to the shops. It belongs to the living and the dead. And the dead, remember. Good night. Bye.